All right, we're live here with Steve. He spent 9 years in the military. Steve, I appreciate you coming on the show.
My pleasure, brother.
And you spent 9 years in the military. Where did you grow up, and what intrigued you to join the military?
I grew up in Virginia in a small town, Fredericksburg, and I guess what drove me that way kind of was when I was a baby. My dad was in the National Guard, and once in a blue moon, I guess I saw him in uniform. And I have no recollection of this, but I saw pictures later that kind of, bring something in the head. And maybe there was a little oppositional defiance disorder going on, but my parents wanted me to go into business or wanted me to be a priest or whatever. And every time I mentioned the Army or the military, not necessarily the Army at that point, it was, oh, hell no, we'll kick you out of the house type of thing. But not quite that extreme, but it was strongly disapproved of.
Yeah.
And I went to college for a couple of years, and growing up very strict Catholic, getting away to a college that just went co-ed from girls to guys, or girls to girls and guys. Basically, I wasted 2 years partying, and I was in ROTC in the Army Reserves at that point, and decided I wanted to do something more valuable with my life. And at that point, I walked down to the recruiter's office, signed some papers. Then I told mom and dad about it. So went unassigned Ranger, and I, same as you, went down to Fort Benning and had fun and games down there, went to jump school. I'm an OldScroll Ranger. I went to RIP when it was run at the battalion level, where you could be pretty much beaten and abused. Yeah. And went to Fort Lewis for that. Went to Charlie Company and was injured. Then they put me in the 3 shop. And while I was getting more treatment, I went through the 1 shop for a little bit, back to Charlie Company, back over to where I worked at RIP for a little bit before we closed down. And the regiment took over. And then the RIP went to Fort Benning. I got to remember this. And then I went back to the 3 shop, and then I got told I couldn't jump anymore, and I ended up going to the 101st and working in the 3 shop there for a bit.
Now, when you say the 3 shops for civilian people,
what are my bad.
S1, S3, what does that consist of?
The S1 is your personnel and administration. They handle your money, write up your rewards, handle your transfers, all that kind of stuff. Your 2 shops is your intel. That's where sometimes you get your spooks, your linking in with other agencies, such as, in the Ranger Battalion, we got intel from NSA, CIA, all these other people. And then you have your 3 shop, which is basically the brains of any unit. You have your commander, but the commander has a staff, and in his staff, the 3 shop is the ones that basically carry 90% of the load. You're doing the op orders, you're doing the planning, you're linking up, you're doing all the effective things to make your unit the most effective. Making sure you have beans and bullets, you then turn to the S4 shop. That's the logistics. And in my day, that's as far as it went. I understand there's an S5, which handles mostly your class 6 type things. And let's say you wanted an extra PT shirt, or you wanted a Ranger point, or you wanted something else. That would be a 5 shot. Excuse me for a minute. Hey, settle down. Settle down. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good.
Oh, that's my one in training being a pain in the ass right now. Anyway, and there's supposed to be a 6 shop too, but that is something I'm not familiar with. Stop it. So then after I left the 101st, I went to the Army had started a new Sapper concept, and I went to the 229th Sapper Battalion and was a squad leader there, and finished that up. I was a little disappointed and decided to get out completely, and I entered police work after that, like a lot of the infantry guys do. You graduate from carrying a gun in one uniform to another one.
Yeah. Well, going back to like RIP, I know it's called RAPS now, Ranger Assessment Selection Program, yeah. I think it is. And
yeah, it's tough. I'll tell you what, it's tough now. I got a lot of respect for the young Rangers. It's different. You got to be a different kind of hard, and you got to be a different kind of smart than our day.
So in your day, what kind of hard are you talking about? You know, for civilians, because they don't know that lifestyle.
Well, we had our own version of the long walk, and if you're familiar with that, that's what what's called Delta does, and basically it's a 40-mile hike through the mountains of West Virginia with no time. They don't tell you you have to complete this 40-mile walk in 20 minutes. Well, in RIP, we ended up doing, I believe it was a 26-miler with 85-pound packs, and it was until X number of people quit. It wasn't, we're going to go 26 miles. It was, we're going to go as hard and as fast as we can until 10% of the class quit. Because there's only so many slots in battalion, so only so many people can graduate and get assigned to battalion. So basically that was one way of weeding you out. Of course, you know, day one is like your typical, you know, they wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning with grenade simulators and artillery simulators and firing blank machine gun rounds at you, getting you outside in your underwear and going through the worm pit for a couple hours just to see who quit.
What's
and that
the
was
worm pit?
What it was designed to back then. The first couple of weeks was basically designed to see who wanted it bad enough.
Yeah. What's the worm pit?
It was a long trench that was filled with mud and other assorted things. And in Fort Lewis weather, invariably it would be ice cold. And you'd have to low crawl underneath the barbed wire and get all muddy and nasty in your underwear.
I think we did the same kind of thing in basic. It's where you're laying on your back and you kind of shimmy through it.
Yep. Or sometimes it's on your belly. It was just, okay, roll over the other way, back and forth, back. And it was a lot of mind games to get people to quit. The first couple of weeks of RIP back then was. And it was designed more to make you hard rather than, and make sure you wanted to be there rather than, get you trained up.
So then you get to battalion, and did you go to Savannah or would you?
No, I went to Fort Lewis.
Fort Lewis, that's correct.
Yeah. What's now, I guess, Joint Base in Fort Lewis. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
How was that? How was it being in Ranger Regiment there?
We weren't there. At first, it wasn't a regiment. It was just, there were just 2 battalions.
Gotcha.
And we were kind of, because we were so far away from the flagpole, it. We basically, it was 878 straps for a belt rather than the typical cheap little black army belt. And then it was 550 cord with an extra 6 feet for boot laces and things like that. That wasn't regular army, but it made more tactical sense.
Gotcha.
And once regiment took over with the new commanders and everything, we had to fall in line with the army way. That caused a lot of issues. We had probably, when regiment took over and things started falling that way, we probably had a platoon worth of senior NCOs walk over to 1st SF group and sign in. Because it went from being a high-speed unit, more similar to being falling in line with regular army. And that change is hard for a lot of the older guys at that point.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. But it was a good time. I'm still to this day in touch with my old team leader. I've kind of lost touch with my platoon sergeant. That was George Gephardt. Last I heard, he was over in Indonesia doing security contracting. A couple of the other guys I was real close with in the Ranger Battalion. We're still tight today.
That's awesome.
I had lunch with one of them probably, I don't know, maybe a month ago. And he's about 2 hours away and was passing through, and it's like, hey, let's have lunch. Boom, done. So
yeah, unique brotherhood.
It is, and I think any infantry unit or any unit where you've seen some shit, you're going to be tighter than a lot of things. For instance, like in law enforcement, there's not but maybe 1 or 2 people I probably would ever even bother talking to again.
Really?
But you tell me you were a ranger or a paratrooper or an infantry guy, hey, I'll buy you a beer.
Hell yeah.
So stop.
So did you reclass to go Sapper or?
No, I was reassigned. Basically because of my injury, but I went to the combat engineer school, and they were just getting the Sapper concept online. And I did not get to go to the Sapper school. I started it, and it was a Virginia National Guard Sapper school that got decertified. So at that point, it didn't happen.
Gotcha.
Because they weren't following the LOI. They lost their certification, and you don't get to, what's the word I want to use? You don't get qualified that way, for lack of a better term.
Gotcha.
You can settle down.
And you spent how many years doing the Sapper deal?
4.
Do you like it, or is it?
It was basically just, honestly, it was not much different than a regular infantry unit in this situation, because it was a Sapper concept. We had no engineering equipment. And basically, I taught patrolling classes, and we did demo. That was it.
Wow.
And breaching techniques. Let me go through that. Breaching techniques too. So you learned how to breach a wire and breach an obstacle, make satchel charges, make Bangalore torpedoes, that type of stuff.
Blow shit up.
And and that's a good time.
Oh hell yeah! Who don't like something to go bang? You know what I mean?
Yeah, unless it's a body part.
Yeah, then it's never good.
Nope.
So did you do any deployments, or was it all stateside, or?
At that point, well, we deployed on exercises, worked with the Marine Corps once or twice, worked with, at that time it was called SEAL Team 6, back when Dick Marcinko ran it. So that should give you an idea of the age and time range. Actually got to meet him on an operation in we were based off of Guam on the airfield on Tinian Island, and there was a mishap with one of the I think it was a 141 was coming into land, and it took the rotor gear off a Black Hawk that was clearing the airfield. And there was miscommunication because the Black Hawk couldn't talk to the 141, and the nose gear of the 141, which is basically like a 747, I keep forgetting we got civilians there, took off the top rotor and it crashed and injured a bunch of the Rangers on there. And the whole exercise basically got put on hold until they could make sure they could get that 141 down safely.
Damn.
Years later, I actually met him when I was on a contract job and working out of Fort Belvoir. And he's, at that time, was in his 70s and still a wild, hard man. Oh,
I imagine. He's a legend in the SEAL community. I know that.
Well, he's probably a legend up in your Front Royal, Virginia, too, because the man, I'm going to tell you what, I caught him, not caught him, but I was near the Class 6 store, and he was coming out with a grocery cart full of alcohol. It's like, yeah, it's still drinking hard.
Damn.
Mm-hmm. He told me we were going to catch up for lunch one day, but then I went overseas, and he was telling me he was down there like every 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So good man though, and he loves Rangers. Ironically, for a SEAL, he thinks the world of the Ranger Regiment, the Ranger Battalion.
Yeah. Well, they work together a lot, I think.
Yeah, well, Rangers have to save SEALs all the time. I'm not being sarcastic. You ask anybody, third bat guys, second bat guys, I know have done it. I don't know about first bat, but yeah. SEALs need to stay in their lane instead of the politics of SOCOM, of letting everybody have missions that aren't necessarily geared towards them, in my humble opinion. Yeah,
no, this is a speak your mind, tell how you feel, man.
Yeah. Years later, I got to work with some of the guys from Navy Special Warfare Group 4, which is Team 4, and I believe Special Boats 21 or 22. And they were all great young men, no question about it. Hard charges and everything. But you get them off the water, they're lost.
Really?
Land nav, firearms surprised me how bad they were.
Damn.
Yeah. But all good young men, though. And it turns out I had run their master chief in charge of that training course, and I had crossed paths years ago. So just like anything in the military, it's a small world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you get out, and then are you already wanting to join the police force, or you just don't know what you want to do when you get out, or you have a good game plan and it goes astray, or how that all
actually my long-term plan was to let my back heal up and re-enlist.
Gotcha.
and try to get back to either the Ranger Regiment at that point or over to SF or something. And as far as getting out, I tried a sales job for about 6 months, and I just am not the type to sell. So I can sell, for instance, later on when I came back from one of the trips overseas, I did work at a gym and I sold memberships, but that's easy. Hey, you're fat, come in, join. You know what? We'll get you working out and get you back in shape. I can tell people that. You can't tell people that when you're trying to sell them clothes. Hey, you need to drop 25, 30 pounds so you look good in this suit type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did that job. I did a sales job briefly while I was waiting to get hired. And I got a job offer, and then it was rescinded because they did a quote unquote emergency minority hire of a guy that did not even make the hiring list. That's how bad it was.
Damn.
They hired him over me, another veteran, and another certified police officer. And he got caught cheating in the academy, not once, but twice. Caught cheating on the range, and ended up, after about 2 years and 3 or 4 field training officers failing him, he resigned on his own, even though they were ordered to pass him.
Damn.
So, and I got the next offer and got into it. And it was enjoyable, but I don't recommend that transition for a lot of people, especially if you're an independent thinker or you don't blindly follow orders or you don't play politics.
Yeah.
It's the amount of politics in police work shocked me. So,
like, what kind of politics?
Oh man, what I could tell you. Well, we'll start with, I was right outside of Quantico Marine Corps Base, and probably 10% of the officers I worked with were former Marines. Our patrol, one of our captains was a former Marine. So I was off duty, come in on a day shift. We rotated shifts every single week at that point. And he calls me in the office and he's going to suspend me for 3 days pending an investigation. I'm saying, what the hell for? He says, well, for the riot last night, I got 20 complaints on you. I was like, Captain, I didn't work last night. I'm here on day work today. I could not have worked last night. Did you check the roster? Did you check the call list? Did you check pull the tapes to see which officers were working and whose voice it was? And he got real pissed off at me because of how dare I question him to defend my innocence. And it turns out it was another one of the Marine Mafia guys. And it disappeared.
Really?
Yeah. And you can actually Google this guy. His name's Dan Harless. Dan left us and went to Cincinnati. And he got, basically his car camera caught him threatening to murder somebody.
Jesus.
In the middle of an arrest. And he arrested a guy falsely, and a long story, but Dan was a good guy. His PTSD got to him.
Yeah.
And police work will do that to you. I can tell you that.
I'm sure. I mean,
but anyway, that was part of the politics. I took a rape report on 2 officers, rape under the color of law, because basically I arrested a girl for marijuana and cocaine, and she wanted me to take her to the FOP, and she even knew where it was, and said, well, these 2 officers arrested me before, and I basically had sex with both of them at the same time, and they dropped her charges.
Really?
Yeah. Hold on a second, ples. You need to settle down. I said, this is he's a big puppy. So he's a little happy these days with squirrels and people. So, and I was training, I can tell you, I can go on for hundreds of stories. We had a call of a 911 call. A lady is saying there's a man in the field across from her house shooting into her house. The dispatch kept the line open, and you could actually hear the gunshots. The lady's on the floor, scared to death, crying, screaming. I'm probably 30 minutes away, running balls to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And for anyone who's ever been in military or police work, for a house cat type, a detective, for instance, or an administrator, or let's say an officer, as in a captain or lieutenant type, to leave the office to back me up. That should tell you how hot that call came out.
Yeah.
Well, I get there, the guy's in the field with a rifle, and I'm coming up on his blind side, have my gun out, drop the gun, get on your knees, cross your left leg over your right, put your hands up, by the book, by the numbers. And the guy was 100% cooperative. Get him handcuffed. The first detective that got there as my backup said, I know this guy. This can't be right. And I said, well, you go ahead and take the cuffs off him, then you watch him. Let me go talk to the lady. Turns out the guy was shooting a 270, a very flat shooting rifle, and he was shooting groundhogs in the field because he's got cows that come into that field. He was moving cows into that field, didn't want them breaking legs. Okay, perfect. And this is, rural Virginia. That part of the county was rural. Perfectly makes sense, perfectly logical. Did he break a law or two? Yeah, kinda. He was firing too close to a house. He pointed the weapon in the direction of the house. Technically, that's brandishing. And he was firing too close to a road. But I didn't charge him. I said, big misunderstanding. I walked him over to the lady. He apologized, and the whole thing went away. I didn't see a necessary intent to commit a crime. Nobody got hurt. She actually didn't get any bullets in her house. It was just the sonic crack of the round is what she heard.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, I'm getting yelled at saying, how dare I put handcuffs on someone that's contributed to the sheriff's campaign?
How are you supposed to know that?
Good question. But I got strongly chastised for it. And when I asked the supervisor, did you listen to the call? Well, no, I'm just repeating what the sheriff said. The sheriff listened to the call. Well, I doubt it. I said, okay. Did the guy actually complain? He goes, no, he just wanted to make sure he wouldn't lose his concealed carry permit. I said, there was no charges. The guy was free to go. But the sheriff was so worried about the PR and the, what's the word I want to use? Anyway, he was worried about the PR and worried that he wasn't going to get the money for the next time he ran. And it didn't matter whether or not the guy did break the law. It didn't matter to the sheriff that the woman was scared to death. What mattered was, how dare I put handcuffs on a campaign contributor?
Really?
And that's the kind of politics that made me sick of police work. It really did. There's a lot of favoritism. You put up signs for the, I worked in a police department and a sheriff's office. Particularly in the sheriff's office, the politics works. You put up signs for the sheriff during a campaign, you will probably go up a rank. You give $10,000 to a certain sheriff for a campaign contribution, you will go from slick sleeve, bypass corporal, bypass sergeant, and go to lieutenant. Saw it with my own eyes. That's the kind of corruption of politics that needs to be changed in law enforcement. But that's next to impossible, because in most sheriff's offices, you serve strictly at the pleasure of a sheriff, because all constitutional officers do that.
Yeah.
So
how long did you spend in the police force? Or are you still in it?
Oh, no, I did 10 years in the police department, and I did 2 in the sheriff's office, and I taught at the police academy for about 7. And I was done at that point.
Did you do SWAT? I saw something about
I was on the SWAT team. I did street crimes. I did every position on the SWAT team. I was entry team. I was an entry team leader. I did sniper. I did breacher. I was also on the we had a street crimes unit and did that too. Basically, that was focusing on street level narcotics most of the time.
Deal with a lot of bad guys and stuff.
I guess it depends on how you want to look at it. We did a lot of cocaine work, as in this is back when crack cocaine, a few years after crack cocaine got real big, and it was a big business.
Yeah.
And we focused on drug interdiction and basically making it hard for them to do their job. Does it make them bad guys? You know what? I look back on that and I wonder, if you're poor and you're doing stuff to put food on the table, I don't know. It's
double-edged sword for real.
Well, yeah. And you look at today, you can go to a doctor and I've had friends who have become addicts because the doctors put them on such strong meds, and then all of a sudden one day cut them off.
They got to go get some from somewhere.
Yep. And a lot of them will turn to whatever's on the street. I personally think marijuana should be legalized.
I do too. I mean, it's grown, you know what I mean? You're not making it out of different stuff, but
yeah,
I don't know. That's a tricky deal. You know, some people are for it. Some people are against it. You know,
well, my personal, I guess you could say, some knowledge, some opinion. Big insurance is against it because you're going to have possibly an uptick in people driving under the influence of marijuana and having accidents. I can think I arrested 200 to 300 some DUIs, and I only did maybe half a dozen DUIDs.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on a second. We need to settle down. And most of those were prescription med DUIDs.
Wow.
Not, okay, you're too high on marijuana. I didn't have that. And, heck, we actually had a couple officers who had accidents that were on prescription meds. It was just, that's an unusual balance. And also you're going to have law enforcement doesn't want to do it because it's business. People don't realize law enforcement's a big business. So it's,
as far as getting like quota and stuff.
Well, you get your quota. Yeah, you get an easy scratch for a marijuana arrest. Every department that I knew put it at different value ranges, and but I saw some shady stuff too. We had a deputy that would stop basically any teenage kid, and he was profiling teenagers, and he would say, "Oh, I smell marijuana in your car," and use that to justify a Terry stop. Terry versus Ohio, it's a Supreme Court case that justifies you doing a search without a warrant. And he'd go in their car, and I backed him up on 2, and I walked away on the second one because he said he smelled the marijuana, and the only thing they had in the car was an empty baggie with a couple grains of marijuana in the bottom. That is it. And he tried to tell me he could smell that when the car drove past us when we were on foot. He chased it down. Then he said, "Oh, I could smell that." He was full of shit. It got to the point where the prosecutors wouldn't even handle his cases, and he was later moved over to a different. I'll be careful how I say this. He got moved over to a different section to do different type of work, so he couldn't do that stuff anymore. But he was politically connected and was basically untouchable, even when he did shady stuff like that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What do you think about what's going on today with all the police brutality? Do you think half of it's true, half of it's bullshit? I mean, what's your outlook on it?
I think most Americans watch too much TV and don't realize the level of violence it takes to subdue an individual and put handcuffs on them that don't want to be handcuffed. I think most Americans don't realize that I can stand in front of you, and if you don't have a taser or you don't have a baton, and most cops don't know how to fight, you're not one-on-one, you're not going to handcuff me unless you hurt me really, really bad if I don't want to go. And that's the ugly side of the truth, because an officer should never, and in certain states it's this way, in Virginia it says on a warrant, "You shall arrest." It doesn't say, "Oh, you have to wait until the circumstances are perfect and make an arrest." You have a warrant in hand, there's a suspect, you let him go because you're scared to make the arrest or you're scared of bad PR, and he goes out and commits more crimes, that's on you. You own that. Do I think things need to be changed? Yeah, I said that decades ago. I know in Virginia there is a police officer's Bill of Rights, but it doesn't apply to deputies, because deputies are served at the pleasure of a sworn constitutional officer. So a deputy can write the wrong ticket one day and come in and get fired. It's that simple. I think that needs to be extended to all law enforcement officers. And I think all law enforcement should have a avenue to address certain issues where if you have a problem with the chain of command, all chiefs and sheriffs should have an open door policy. But you rarely find that.
Yeah.
There should be a way where you can go in there and say, hey, I'm getting told to do some shady stuff. And this supervisor's ordering it, which, I was actually told to allow another officer to forge my signature and arrest people, or actually issue summonses. I was told to watch a post, allow him to make the stops, him to write the tickets, him to forge my signature, and then submit those papers to the court. Now, I think anybody with a little common sense can see you're writing people for running a red light or stop sign or whatever it was that day, and you're committing felonies to justify traffic enforcement.
Yeah, that's
and
bullshit.
And me and the lieutenant got into a shouting match over it, and it turned out not to happen, because I told him, I said, I just had this conversation with the judge a couple of weeks ago, and I was on bike patrol. We had a DUI, and basically, because the way the law was written, I had another officer to stop the DUI. That stop alone was good, but for that officer to make the arrest without seeing the DUI wasn't good, and we lost that case. And that's basically because the way the law was written. So, and I told, when I brought that down there, saying we can't do it this way. We got to find a better way to do it. Basically, shut the fuck up and get the fuck out of my office.
Yeah.
And that was, again, it goes back to some of the politics and games. They were more worried about getting their quota and putting the numbers up so the chief thinks they're doing a good job, rather than actually doing police work out there.
Do you think some police officers do target certain individuals, or do you think it's, I don't know. The reason I'm asking, because you were a former cop. I haven't been a cop, and I've never.
Did we target individuals? Yeah, we targeted regulars. We knew people were in the game. When I say the game, the drug business, we would target them. We'd sit down there. We'd see them on the street corner at 2:00 in the morning, and their little guys, their little runners or whatever, were getting the dope. One was carrying a gun. One was holding the money.
Mm-hmm.
That type of stuff. Did we target those crews? Absolutely. Did it matter to us what race they were? Absolutely not. It was the business model. They made it easy by standing on the street corners doing what they were doing. It had nothing to do with whether you're black or Hispanic or white or whatever, because we had white guys doing it down there with the black guys. It was basically, it's a poverty. It's a social, you need to settle down. It's a poverty thing.
Yeah.
And when you work in a neighborhood where, the 16-year-olds grow up thinking it's okay to carry a gun and deal dope, well, when they're 20 and already done 2 stints in jail, they're still going to be in the game. They can't get a job after that.
Mm-hmm.
Did I see people target people because for, let's say traffic enforcement because they were of any color? No, because a lot of times you can't even see what the driver looks like when you stop a car. You're too far back. When you see the violation, you get up on them. You don't, most cops I know don't give a rat's ass. They really don't. I own, like we were talking before, I only know of 2 cops that I would consider racist. And one incident I witnessed firsthand, one of them I had heard around the water cooler type of situation, but him I have no doubt of. Now, plus he made a remark to me one day about, I saw an officer beat a kid. And when I say beating, his arms were like windmills hitting this kid about 20 times in the head while the kid was face down in the dirt.
That's ridiculous.
I went to the captain about it. He goes, well, you're brand new and you'll understand more about those people when you get more experience. And that always left a bad taste in my mouth. But I learned later that the narcotics officer that did that was basically this captain's best friend, and this captain was grooming him to be his replacement. So he was untouchable.
Wow.
So, and that goes back again to the politics. The same guy got stopped 3 times in 15 minutes for reckless driving. and nothing was done to him. One officer stopped him downtown for running red lights or whatever, let him go because it was a narcotics supervisor. A few minutes later, the same car stopped again. Now, I had no idea what the car was, who it was or whatever. And I'm right at the city-county line. Probably about 5 minutes later, I got a car running through my radar about 80 in a 45. I have to go down, turn around on it, and I notified the county, notified the state police, and all of a sudden my cell phone starts going off, the alternative channel starts going off, and the narcotics supervisor comes on the air saying, I'm in the area, can I help you? And I realized instantly it was him. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. You've already got stopped twice, and this is the third time in 15, 20 minutes, and not a thing happened to him. And other guys were fired for a lot less stuff than that. Yeah,
I had an incident. My grandfather was really sick, and we were going through Whitfield, Virginia. I was actually coming back, and
I know exactly where you're talking.
Yeah, it's a fucking trap right there. And
yep,
I'm in a damn one of them sports cars, Eclipse, and I'm going with the flow of traffic, and there's this car that comes up, and I'm like, oh, I thought he's gonna rear end me, and he's going in and out of cars, but his car is gray, mine was gray, and next thing you know, here comes a cop up on me, so I move over. I'm like, he's got to be going to get this guy. He follows behind me there, so I get back over to the left lane. I think he's trying to get around because there's so many vehicles.
Right.
He keeps following me. And so I pull over and I'm like, what the, I'm like, he got to get us mixed up. So he comes up to my window and he goes, you know why I pulled you over? I'm like, sir, I have no idea. He goes, you were going 87 in a 65. I looked at him. I was like, you're out of your mind, guy. I was like, you are out of your mind. I said, first off, I had it set on cruise control. I just hit the brake because this dude almost rear-ended me. I thought he was going to rear-end me. And another thing is I'm not going 87 with my daughter in the back. And he leans in the car. No joke. Like his face is right here by my chest.
Right.
He goes, oh, yeah. In the state of Virginia, that's an illegal booster seat. That's another ticket. And I'm like, dude, screw you, dude. And that's what I said to him. I've never been disrespectful to one because I'm like, I just want to go on my damn way. But I'm like, are you serious? He goes, yeah. I'm like, I'm from North Carolina. He's like, well, you need to read up on the rules on when you pass through here. I'm like, who the fuck does that, jackass?
Actually, there are exceptions in the law for traveling through states, and a good cop knows that.
Well, it's funny. I'm like, just go write my ticket so I can go on my way. I got things to deal with. So he comes back and hands me the ticket. Dude, I'm not even shitting you when I tell you this. I go on my way. I get a phone call. My grandfather passes away. I'm already back in North Carolina. Just hit the line. I'm traveling back through. He fucking tags me again. 87 and a 65. And I'm like, I see him coming up and I'm like, you have got to be fucking kidding me. So I got 2 tickets in one day doing the same speed. And I know I wasn't doing 87 that time. And I was like, let me guess, I was doing 87 and 65. And he's like, yep.
Okay. Number one, never say that.
Dude, I was just pissed.
That would always be used against you in court. And never talk. I mean, if officer asks you why you always start this routine. You know why I stopped you? The smart answer is no, officer, I do not.
Mm-hmm.
And let him throw it out there. In this day and age, with GPS on your phone, there's always a way to prove you're not speeding if you aren't, or what you actually were doing, especially if you have something like Live 360 or one of the other tracking devices. But there's and that is one issue with officers having quotas. They'll be out there writing tickets. You got guys that love to write tickets. My first couple of years, I was brainwashed into thinking that because that's what my field training officer said was the most important thing. And I was writing 50, 60 tickets a month. And then I had a more veteran officer. Well, actually, I had an incident with the field training officer after I was cut loose, where he was kind of on the yellow side. And I had another veteran officer say, hey, this is what you really should be focusing. And I took what he said to heart and changed everything I was doing. I started focusing on criminal work and quality of life stuff for people rather than just being out there getting my quota. And we had a quota. We had 20 pieces of paper a month, which isn't bad if you think about it. That could be written warnings, that could be tickets, that could be arrest warrants, whatever. The sheriff's office I went to later had 100 points a month. And to tell you how the politics played, a written warning was only worth a quarter of a point. A ticket that would generate money for the county was worth 1 point. A felony arrest, let's say an armed robbery suspect, was worth 4 points. A DUI, which generates again more money for the state and the county, was worth 8 points. So you can start to see the picture of how law enforcement is a revenue generating agency. And
Wow.
for instance, like your case, you went through a very small town in Virginia. A
Shithole.
lot of towns make a lot of money by targeting major roadways and getting people for speeding, especially if you're from out of state. And I know there was an incident, and I think Congress changed the law. There was an incident where Alabama, Mississippi, somewhere down there, an agency made 300% of its budget, entire budget, by ticketing people.
Damn.
That's ridiculous. That breeds corruption.
Oh, absolutely. It's no
Absolutely
different
does.
from raiding a house and taking all the money that's in it.
Well, it depends on what you're raiding the house for now. We've raided houses that there was nobody that had a job, and they'd have $17,000, $18,000, $20,000 in cash in there. Nobody had a job. Nobody could show where that money came from. And you knew damn well it came from, selling cocaine.
Oh, yeah.
That's a little bit different. But, because if you work in a neighborhood long enough, you're going to know the people. You're going to know who works where, what car they drive, that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
But no, I really think there needs to be changes. I think most police officers could use more training. This defund the police bullshit is ridiculous.
I agree.
Every officer
100%.
should be attending regular mixed martial arts classes. That way they don't have to rely on a taser as much, per se, even though the use of force curriculum requires you follow certain steps most of the time. But it would give them more confidence. And tasers are not 100% reliable.
Yeah.
They work 100% of the time, about 40 to 50% of the time. That's it. And they've had tasers not work at all. I know of an incident where a guy caught on fire from a taser.
Damn.
Yeah. His hair and his body hair and his head on his head caught on fire from a taser. Might have had something to do with the alcohol content in his body. I don't know, but it's one of the guys on my former SWAT team went to arrest a guy and had to tase him.
I mean,
So,
what
but also I
confuses
think
me-
we need to educate citizens. We ran an open house one night when I taught at the police academy, and we invited judges and lawyers. And one of the things when I taught officer safety and survival, we had a 1 minute. They called it fight for life. It really wasn't, but basically you had one person play a bad guy and one person play an officer, and one-on-one you had to cuff the suspect. And the suspect could not punch, could not kick, could not bite. All the things that happen in a real fight. So the suspect was already handcuffed in what he could do. And we had one of the gentlemen that is now a circuit court judge in Virginia, which is like one of the highest judges, one step below the Virginia Supreme Court. He basically said after about 2 to 3 seconds of hard wrestling, he would have shot the guy and been perfectly fine with it. He was one of our prosecutors. Because most people don't realize the violence it takes and the strength it takes and the endurance it takes to try to put the handcuffs on somebody that doesn't want to be cuffed. And now this is not somebody who's high on PCP or cocaine or anything else. This was just one-on-one with two normal people. But we had a lot of the lawyers. It kind of opened up their eyes, and even a couple of the defense lawyers kind of changed their stand on thinking we were being so brutal and we had to physically hurt somebody to arrest them.
Yeah. I mean, what do you do when you're telling someone to get on the ground and they're running to their car and going into a bag. I mean, what do you do?
You know what? It's a hard decision to make. You just tackle them. You know, in my day, yeah, that's what we did. You just tackle them and you use physical force to subdue them with, unless you saw a weapon. You pull a knife or a gun, if I can, I'm going to give you a warning, and then that's all she wrote. I went to shoot a kid one night, and just as I'm squeezing the trigger, he looked at me and dropped the gun, and he got lucky, but it was that fast. And I was coming up on one side, and another officer was coming up behind him. He pulled a gun on 3 unarmed Marines because they had a bar fight. And it was just, he listened. But a lot of people today, citizens, don't realize what officers go through, so they think they can talk to you like shit, which, yeah, they can. But they also think, well, I didn't do anything wrong right this minute, so you can't arrest me. Well, you don't know that you're not being arrested for something you did 2 weeks ago, and there's a warrant on
you. Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the best thing to do. Is just comply. Be quiet, comply, and deal with it through the system later. Because if you get arrested or something, you know, and they're wrong, well, you're going to, you know, a good lawyer is going to get you a ton of money for it.
Yeah. So what the thing is, every time I've got pulled over, I don't, you know, that was the only time I ran my mouth because I knew the dude was in for me. You know what I mean? And
right.
What my question was,
a lot of traffic cops are like that, though. A lot of traffic cops are guys who can't cut it on the street, working drugs or something else.
So when you tase somebody, is it showing what car it is, or is it showing just speed of a car?
Well, it depends if you're using laser or radar. Now, if someone's trying to clock you in heavy traffic, it's next to impossible. There's something called the batching effect. Radar picks up, it doesn't pick up the fastest. It will pick up the closest and then the largest object. So for instance, let's say you're in a VW Bug and you're going down the road at 60 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you got a tractor trailer coming up behind you at 80, the radar is going to be bouncing off of both. And you're not going to get a true and accurate reading. Laser, on the other hand, that pinpoints the car because you have to aim it like you aim a firearm. And that will give you an exact reading. I'll give you an exact reading very quickly. Basically, I don't know enough to say you could ever argue a laser ticket, where you can easily argue radar tickets.
Yeah, because I even asked him. I'm like, I want to see my speed because I know I wasn't going 87. He's like,
well, in Virginia, they don't have to show you. Number one, because they don't always lock it in. And then in your, you know, the first situation, he lost sight of the vehicle. He should not. A good cop's going to say, okay, he got away. I'll get him another day. You know, he should have known the make and model of the car versus the make and model of your car. Just because you're chasing a gray car doesn't mean you're chasing the same gray car.
Yeah. Oh, I was heated, boy. And my fuse ain't long to begin with, and it just burned out on that one. And it was crumbled when I was coming back through and got it. So I was pissed. But
and that's understandable. I mean, but everybody speed. I didn't know a cop that didn't speed.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was doing traffic enforcement type of stuff on a regular shift, I would give 13 to 15 over before I'd stop you. That way you couldn't really argue with me. And on top of that, I knew at that point, I usually drove at least 10 miles over everywhere just out of habit.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to be a hypocrite by stopping people for 2 or 3 or 5 miles over.
The funny part was when I went to court over it, I was wearing my championship ring because of a buddy of mine. I probably shouldn't put it out there, but oh well. He got out of a ticket because he was like, "What's that ring you got on?" The judge, and he told him it was a Jimmy Johnson championship ring, and got out of the ticket. So I was like, I'll try that. Well, I didn't get out of my tickets. I got out of the booster seat deal because he was like, that's just absurd. And he's like, but read up on the traffic laws or whatever. The judge was awesome. But the
Well,
funny thing of this
normally,
whole,
if that was your sorry, but normally, if that was your first offense, they can offer you a traffic school where then the ticket's thrown out afterwards,
they
unless
did, but I was in NASCAR and I lived 3 hours away, and there was no way I could do it because I was gone Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it just didn't work
right.
out. I was like, just give me the tickets, I'll pay them. So as I'm walking out and go to pay the whatever the deal, the tickets, the cop comes up to me. He's like, "Oh, that's a championship ring." I said, "Yeah." Because you think you can get me some passes? I said, "Hell no."
That's shitty. But
It's fucked up.
but you know what? I'll tell you what, we had one officer that and he got in trouble for it, but he never got fired. Was basically using his traffic stop to hit on women.
Jesus.
But he wouldn't do it on the stop. He was smart. He'd wait till the court case was over.
Yeah.
And then he'd do it. On top of that, he was married. And I had my wild and crazy days, but I think cheating is one of the worst things you can do. And if you're going to cheat on your spouse and you're a cop, how good is your word in court then?
None.
My personal, yeah. But, in all fairness, though, I know that there's a small contingent in a lot of agencies of swingers and swappers. So that's your own thing, and that's consensual. I'm not going to judge. But using your job to hunt down chicks, that's wrong.
Yeah, I know a guy that used to do it. He got in Maryland, and yeah, he's a fucking turd. But that's a whole nother story. He's a jackass. Got caught with the girl in the front seat of his cop car, and yeah, just bad deal. Well, now it's an idiot.
We had an officer that locked himself in the back naked with a girl. And he got on the radio and he said, go to channel 4, which is the talk around channel, which isn't recorded. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you tell one guy to go to the alternative frequency, everybody's going to go to the alternative frequency.
Yeah.
So the next thing you know, you got 10 cop cars up where he's parked, and he and the chick are naked in the back seat. Now, he got 3 days off without pay for that. Is what it is. He ended up marrying her anyway, but.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, well, and basically our shift lieutenant said, what you do on your lunch break's your own business.
Yeah.
As long as you don't neglect a code 1 call or something, I don't care what you do. And a lot of the guys nearby, and I know guys that would go home or go to their apartment and hook up because, when you're in uniform as a cop, chicks do throw it at you a lot.
Oh, I'm sure.
Ain't no lie about that, especially if you take care of yourself, you work out, and you present a good appearance.
Yeah, same thing in the military. Chicks love dudes in uniform.
Oh yeah, we had our share of Rangerettes up at Fort Lewis.
Oh, I'm sure.
So
yeah,
but no, getting back to it, I do think that there's changes. I think officers could use, instead of rushing them through a 6-month academy and teaching them to memorize code sections, instead of that, teach them how to research, and then you focus on things that are important, your people talking skills. I was weak at that. I came, pretty much straight out of 2 hardcore units, Ranger Battalion and the 101st. There was, I don't care what anybody says, they're like Hertz rent-a-cars. We're not airborne anymore, so we try harder.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really strapped there. So I come in with the NCO attitude when I got into police work, or you're going to do what I say, or you're going to go to jail type of thing, instead of listening to people and trying to problem solve. That came later. My first 2 years, I was a walking mess because I had a shitty FTO. And that's a big thing. When I put in to go to FTO school, I actually got my ass chewed because on the form, they ask, why do you want to go? And I put, so I don't get cheated in training. So other officers don't get cheated in training like I got cheated. And the captain called me in and he goes, what do you mean by this? And I gave him a handful of things and he basically said, get the fuck out of my office. I don't want to hear it. It is what it is.
It's craziness.
Well, if you bring up certain types of problems or certain things, they don't want to address it.
Yeah.
I tell anybody, if you want to see a good example, and I'm not a fan of television because too many people watch television and think that's how police work really is. It's called the Csi Effect. But if you watch The Wire, the first season or 2, and you see how the detective captain or major is, I had a captain that was worse than him. But the politics being played on cases, that's real. That's about as real as it gets. And that was big city Baltimore. But I worked a small, like I said, 120-man department counting auxiliaries. And you still saw those politics play.
Damn.
It's but yeah, getting back to it, I think you need more problem-solving skills, but people have unrealistic expectations. And I think civilians need to be educated. Citizens need to. You should run a course at the high school level teaching people how to interact with police officers. If you get stopped, this is what you do. You keep your hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, you turn your inside light on, you turn your flashers on, and you don't do anything until the cop tells you something to do. You don't,
very simple.
I almost shot a guy for reaching into his glove box. And I told him, keep your hands right there. And he keeps reaching and reaching and reaching. And he opens a glove box and I see the butt of a pistol and I'm about to squeeze and he comes out with his driver's license, his registration.
Damn.
That's how stupid people get them.
Wonder why.
I don't necessarily have that answer. It's just people handle things differently. You could come up behind a car that's driving in the left lane when they're not supposed to, and they're holding up traffic. You come up behind the car. What do? They lock it right down to the speed limit rather than get over.
Yeah.
That's actually the only ticket, that and disregarding a fire truck or a rescue squad. Those were the tickets I liked writing. Anything else I really didn't care to.
Can't stand people that don't get over for them.
But but some of the things, if you teach people how to interact with police officers who are just doing their job, it's going to make a difference. And if you do that at the high school level and actually not only have cops teach that, but have somebody that has the experience on both sides of the law, or, maybe somebody that did some time come in and say, hey, I screwed up. This is what you don't do to get yourself in trouble. And that would probably cut down on a lot of the shootings. But again, we're seeing such pick and choose by the media to create diversion in this country.
No, I agree.
That's what we're actually seeing. There's police stuff that goes on every day that would amaze people. But unless it is a white officer shooting a black suspect or a brown suspect, you're not going to hear about it. Yeah. If it's a black officer shooting a black suspect, you're not going to hear about it. I'm sorry, I said it the other way. But if it's a white officer, you're going to hear about it. The thing in Minneapolis, the cop was wrong. Do I agree with the verdict? No.
Yeah.
Do I think that it could be that he contributed to the man's death? Absolutely, I do. Was he the sole factor? No. The fentanyl in his system was.
Yeah.
And I think that's enough to show reasonable doubt. And the truth is, I don't think he got a fair trial. And what some of the jurors are now saying, that they felt pressure because they didn't want the city to burn and they knew sooner or later their names would get out. That right there, by law, says he didn't get a fair trial.
Yeah.
So,
well, they shouldn't let the fucking city burn in the fucking first place. You know what I mean? Well,
I've been to Minneapolis, so yeah, it's one of those cities I'm not a fan of.
It's I'm gonna say it. I don't give a fuck. You got people running police out of their precinct and all this shit, and you condone it. Get what fucking country you live in? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I can't think of. I think back that when I was doing patrol work or even street crimes, part of how you handle things is your department rep. They knew that if, let's say somebody resisted arrest hard on an officer, actually fighting, not trying to get away, but actually fighting you. And that's not as common as people think. The next few days, wherever that happened at, particularly if it was a drug area, it got swarmed. We would double the number of cars down there. We would double every single enforcement down there, basically to send a message. Don't screw with the police.
Well, that's the thing. They're not scared of the police anymore because their hands are fucking tied, and it's bullshit.
Well, it goes back again. rare incidents have been blown way out of proportion to what really happens. If
Yeah.
you saw all the good cops do, you know, like the one in Virginia the other day that picked up a car off a woman. He lit, now granted, it was a small car, but come on, you know, even leveraged, it's got weight.
Oh yeah.
And stop it. He pretty much might have saved that woman's life. And
Yeah, but why ain't that all over the news? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you're not going to see things like that a lot of times. Or, you know, I'll tell, I worked with a family where the young girl in this case was, had been molested from the time she was 3 to 13. And then once she was old enough to stay home on her own, she started acting out. She was hooking, she was drinking, she was carrying her boyfriend's gun, she was carrying his drugs, all this kind of stuff. And I worked with her and her parents, and we got her in a 2-year rehab out of state and got her clean. She came home though, and you can't get well in the same environment you got sick in.
Oh no.
And she relapsed. So I think she went back into a different program locally. And then she married a young Marine and actually did okay for herself for a while. And then her, we didn't know about any of this until she was in her 30s about the molesting. She had a psychotic break one day. All of it came flooding back to her, some kind of trigger. And I was out of the department at that time, and she evidently had a big nervous breakdown type of thing, total psychotic break, and was able to remember everything. And years later, a few years later, they went after the guy. And he was in his late 60s, early 70s by then. And he fessed right up. He had been a babysitter in the neighborhood, you know, and basically molested a shit ton of kids. And they convicted him. He pled out on 3. Molested her, her sister, and another kid in the neighborhood. But
well, there's a special place in hell for
I worked
that
with him. And I always looked at it too. If you could take a few minutes a day to just talk to people, it might solve problems later.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's people you can't talk to. You know,
I agree.
Part of it is, hey, I was a white cop. Am I going to be able to talk to? I did have some young kids, minority kids of different races that, you know, I got, you know, information from. I got to talk to, and a couple of them weren't in the game seriously. But when they are in the game, there's nothing you can say to them. It really isn't, because they're already corrupted by the money. They're already corrupted by the peer pressure and the gang and whatever else.
Yeah.
That's why you need programs at a younger age too for kids in particularly single family neighborhoods where mom's working 2 jobs, grandma's trying to babysit the kid for mom, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, the kid's slinging dope out on the street corner. What do? Mom's working 2 jobs, doing all she can. You know, grandma can't really do it so much. There needs to be that's where social services needs to work at night.
Yeah.
Instead of hiding behind a desk type of stuff, because that's not a police matter. But a lot of people right now want to throw that on the police.
Yeah.
So
we got some shitty. I don't know. Our country's turning for the worse.
I think it comes back to family values too, though. You know,
yeah, I agree.
If you don't have a strong role model as far as the dad goes, because most of these kids that I dealt with didn't have a dad in the picture.
Yeah.
And I'm not going just by minorities. It's like the kids we've dealt with, a lot of them don't have a dad in the picture. And whether dad's working and he travels, or whether dad's in jail, dad's dead, whatever, there are still issues.
Yeah.
But no,
I agree.
I would like to see, personally, my old chief said something one time. I took a couple college classes at community college that he taught at. And he once said that he would have police officers work the road for 6 months and go to college and take classes for 6 months, or take training for 6 months, and rotate back and forth like that if he had the budget to do that. And as I got more mature in the job, I agree with that 100%. I really do. You don't get burnt. You wouldn't get burned out that fast. You would be able to handle things a little bit differently because you have more education and training. Do I think a college degree is the answer? No. Most of the kids that went through the police academy that had 4-year degrees, when I say kids, I mean straight out of high school, going to college and decide they want to be a cop with a criminal justice degree, they didn't make it 2 years.
Really?
They did not have the, most veterans would either do okay or would basically say, screw it, this ain't for me, and get out.
Yeah, I imagine.
Because we have, as a veteran, you have more real world experience that you don't get in college. Yeah, I'll tell a story. I'm not going to put the kid's name out there, but we had a young guy, really smart, tiny fellow though, really tiny, maybe 5'2", 5'3", and 120 pounds soaking wet. And we had a warrant for one of our mid-level drug players. And the drug dealer was, his name was Patrick. Patrick was about 6'5", 230, 240, lean build, solid muscle. And this kid one day walks up to him in front of his crew, sticking his finger up in the guy's face, saying, "I got a warrant for your arrest. You got to come with me." Well, what do you think happened? The guy picked him up with one hand and threw him about 20 yards. You know, he disrespected him in front of his crew. The college kid did not have the wherewithal to think, this isn't the time and place to do it. He thought, okay, my badge is going to protect me. And that's not the case.
Yeah.
We went down there. I responded. Another officer with a canine responded, and he was cool with us. And because the other guy had the canine, he went in my car, and I said, what, because I had a rapport with the guy. He was always beating people up and doing stuff, but I wouldn't diss him in front of his crew. I just drive by and I, motion with my hand where he could see it to meet me around the block. And I just sit there and park and say, look, dude, I got a warrant for you. You can sign right here, because we did have releasable warrants. Or I say, you come with me and I'll tell the magistrate you're 100% cooperative. And he would do that. And as long as you gave him the respect on the street for running a crew. And that's how the game's played. But the college kid, after about a year, Lee just said, this ain't for me, and quit.
Yeah.
Because he, again, small guy, couldn't fight. And it was one of those cases where he thought his degree and his badge was going to make it. That's not the real world.
No.
But I think one of the things, criminal justice classes are more theory than practical, whereas behavioral science type classes, understanding the mind, understanding why people do what they do, understanding the environment, those type of classes would be a lot better, I think, for police work.
I agree.
I think it'd be better for anything, because that's, you and I talked about PTSD at one time. And that helped me understand. I took 2 years of brain shrinking courses, and it really helped me understand myself and do some self-healing without self-medication. I barely drink anymore. I might have 1 or 2 drinks a year.
Yeah.
I do use CBD. I'm a big fan of that.
Me too.
When I have a bad day, I try to throw myself in the gym. Maybe once or twice a day if I have a bad day, regardless of the injuries or whatever. I'm going to work through that.
Yeah, I work out every morning. It's actually relieved a lot of stress. I got a CBD company that actually sponsors me, and it's a good product. I never believed in it before, never used it, so I didn't know any knowledge of it. And then when I started taking it, I'm like, man, like when my neck was hurting, I had a real bad crick in my neck yesterday. I rubbed some of this other stuff on it. I mean, it's not going to automatically go away, but it relieves a lot of the pressure, and
right.
I'm a firm believer in it
I use a vape, and I used to smoke an occasional cigar. Again, holidays, special, occasions. That was it. Made again once or twice a year, and then I'd probably be drinking a glass of bourbon with it. That the girl I've been seeing for a long time, her daughter got her into CBD to help her with her injuries. And by extension, she got me to try it. And it's just like, wow, this is a game changer.
Yeah.
And I would love to see that and marijuana legalized. I'm not a fan of the VA overprescribing people, because I know in a firsthand case that killed a friend of mine.
Wow. You want to describe it?
He was on 4 clozapine a day on top of 2 fentanyl patches, and he was walking around like a zombie.
Damn.
And I think what happened, we're not 100% sure, is one day I think he basically took an extra fentanyl patch, because again, you're walking around like a zombie, you forget stuff, and he just didn't come out of his deep slumber, and finally his heart rate slowed down till it stopped. And he was a young, like mid-30s, 10th Mountain vet, real good guy, real decent guy. And you hate to see that.
Oh, I agree.
But the VA wouldn't get him in the counseling he needed. Basically, they said, okay, you can't work anymore because of your injuries and your PTSD, so you're unemployable. So, here's some drugs, here's some money, go away. And that's what happened.
I think, and I work for the VA. I think someone from damn Washington, D.C. needs to come to every one of them and freaking clean house, because it's a bunch of, I don't even want to talk about it. It's a bunch of.
No, I mean, I'll go one better with you on that, because I agree with you. I think that all members of Congress, screw you. You don't get to go to Walter Reed. You go to the nearest veterans clinic in your state.
100%
and
agree.
You get treated like any other veteran.
And shit'll change real quick. I can promise you that.
Oh, it'll change them, and it'll change the VA. No question about that. I'm also a big fan of service dogs. I'm a huge believer in it. My AM staff, Conrad, who's named after my old Sergeant Major, Conrad, he's saved my life a couple times. There's no question about that. Unfortunately, he's getting older and about to retire. But even as recent as about a month ago, he prevented me from having an episode. I've had a ton of concussions. I've had that we know of about 15 concussions. And this goes from childhood all the way up through sports, through military, through mixed martial arts, through police work. And then I had a case of meningitis where my brain was on fire. My temperature got up to 107.7. And then I was in a coma for a week and a half over a septic infection from an injury. And all that affects your brain. So, and he's made a huge difference, and a small stroke. I mean, I forgot that. I'm sure there's other things I'm forgetting. But that's why I ramble a lot. So
No, you're fine, man. I get it.
It's
but no,
between him and the CBD oil, I've gotten certain stressors on that, it's just general life stuff, but are hitting me kind of hard. That between him and the CBD and working out, that takes a lot of the pressure and the pain away.
Oh, I agree.
It really does.
I was always not ashamed, but I just didn't want to talk about it. I knew I had PTSD, but I was like, I'm not ashamed of anything, but I just didn't want to, it was nobody's business. You know what I mean? I was like, whatever, and then the guy I had on last week, Tom Satherley, he kind of put it really into context for me that, hey, it's not nothing to be ashamed of. It's real shit.
Not. I've got somebody very dear to me I wish would get some counseling for basically PTSD and stuff that's avoiding it. It's talking to somebody helps. Like we talked about World War I vets versus guys coming back today. Where World War I, they were coming back on a ship together and doing peer counseling. Whether they realized it or not, that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
And they went shoulder to shoulder in combat together. The units came back as a whole, not rotations as individuals like they did in World War II at the end. And then you look at Korea, same thing. You look at Vietnam, a guy would get a leave and he could be in Bangkok back in civilization, or he could be in Hawaii within 24 hours. You're getting shot at and grenades thrown at you, and all of a sudden you're back with civilians. And your mind does not go back to garrison life or civilian life that fast. It doesn't happen. It could take you weeks or months to calm down.
Yeah.
And not be, on edge all the time. But no,
I'm on
I
Razor's Edge every day.
yeah, and there are things that do that, and again, like I said, matter of fact, I got it right here, my little CBD thing. That's made a big difference. Hitting the gym makes a huge difference too.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I tell everybody I know, even if you don't have PTSD, even if it's going to help your health. You don't need to be a bodybuilder. Just go in there, get your heart rate up, work up a sweat, tone yourself, whatever. Just that motion alone and taking care of your body and trying to eat better helps.
Oh, you feel so much. And that's another thing I've started doing was eating cleaner. And
yeah,
I eat 6 small meals a day. It's chicken, steak, rice, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, you name it.
I've gotten back into it I had a really good influence with the girl I'm in love with, and excellent cook. She is a fantastic chef, and she got me eating right, and even taught me, even though we're geographically separated right now, she taught me how to do some things better in the kitchen myself.
Yeah,
and huge impact.
Makes you feel better too.
Yeah, but one thing, and I don't know if this affects you, but most of the guys I know have sleep disorders.
Oh, dude, I sleep like shit.
Yeah, I can take 3 or 4. I was drinking half a large bottle of ZQL a night at one point in my life, and some days I would go right out and sleep 4, 5, 6 hours, and other days it would have that I can't think of the word, the opposite effect, and I would stay wired.
Mm-hmm.
And be up for 24, 36 hours, whatever. And she worked on that with me too. So it's, I'll give her props for that, where I was actually getting 4, 5, 6 hours sleep a night.
Yeah. Hell, I laid down at 1. Last time I looked at the phone, it actually hit me in my face because I was watching YouTube because I fell asleep. And I looked at it, it was like 3 something. I'm like, God, I got to go to sleep. I got this podcast tomorrow. And then my wife, and then we're leaving, told me goodbye. And I'm like, damn, it's early, but
yeah. Well, I used to fall asleep.
I'm up.
I would fall asleep with the TV blasting.
Yeah.
I got ringing in my ears all the time.
Oh yeah.
And I would fall asleep with the TV up at 100 with either like Black Hawk Down or Last of the Mohicans, something like that going on. And I'd fall asleep to that. And my second ex-wife used to bitch at me all the time about it. And I really didn't realize the effect of that on other people because I couldn't hear it. At level 100, it probably sounds like level 50 for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, and of course, I don't know any guy that served in an infantry capacity or a lot of guys in law enforcement in the SWAT field that doesn't have that ringing in your ear from flashbangs or firearms or something like that.
Yeah, I sure got it. Especially if it's quiet, man. You just hear that bing, and oh God, it drives me nuts.
And if you don't have it, you can. And even if you don't understand it, but even if you have it, it's so hard to explain to people.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard
that you have to have the TV up to a certain level just to drown out that noise in your ear.
Yeah, like even if I put headphones in so I don't hear people talking to read a book because I can't stand outside distractions, I hear that ringing and I'm like, I got to take them out. I got to take them out.
Absolutely,
drives me absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I always have to have some type of noise going.
Yep.
Like if you and I weren't talking right now, I'd had the TV going in the other room.
Yeah.
Just to have that noise out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are. No, then that's something I'm a big fan of the peer counseling aspect to helping each other out. I was in a group in Virginia where I want to say twice a month we would meet at a church, and it could be 10 guys, it could be 25 guys, and occasionally there were some girls in there. Didn't matter what branch you were or nothing like that. There was a little bit of friendly, ball busting, like, okay, you're a Marine, here's some crayons for lunch, that type of stuff. But everybody was supportive. So you could go in there and say, hey, I'm having trouble with my wife and this is what's going on, or I'm having trouble at work because, the supervisor's an idiot, that type of stuff. And you'd have everybody would chime in or contribute to try to make the person feel better, offer solutions.
Well, I think something happened with his phone or something, but we lost him. We'll try to see if he'll come back in. It's kind of weird. Bear with me. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Damn, that was weird. I don't know what happened, but we lost him. We've been on here for an hour and 21 minutes, so I think the podcast is pretty much over anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and end it and send him a text and thank him for coming on and sharing his unique story. I appreciate you guys tuning in and watching. Till the next episode. Thank you.